and welcome to the Farmhouse. I'm Candace Wierzbowski.
And I'm Stephanie Spiker.
Recently, I spoke to Christine Leonard, a sixth-generation dairy farmer in Minnesota. She also owns the Grater Good, and that's Grater spelled Grater as in cheese, where she specializes in creating artisan cheese platters and runs tastings and educational workshops. So as if sitting around eating cheese doesn't sound fun enough, Christine also uses those tastings and workshops to not only introduce people to delicious cheeses that they may not have tried before, but to also talk to them about the dairy industry and put herself forward as an ag ambassador of sorts. So if you know me, you know I love me some cheese. So obviously I was very excited to talk to Christine, not just about her background in dairy, but about, what it takes to make a solid cheese board. So Steph, tell me, what do you like to put on cheese boards if you're making them at home?
I'm going to be honest, I haven't made a lot of cheese boards, but I will just go off of my ideal as of right now. Mm-hmm. I haven't made many, but first of all, we've talked about this. I love a Munster cheese.
Right.
It has to be featured.
Spoiler alert, so does Christine.
Oh, they're so good. I also recently have really gotten into brie. I love a good brie. Like some brie, a nice cracker. Like, I'm a happy camper.
Nice.
And then, oh geez, this is such a hard question. There are so many good cheeses, and I really honestly want to get more kind of out there in my cheese consumption. I feel like I currently am very basic.
I encourage you to explore.
Yeah. In terms of stuff other than cheese, though, I need a good, a dill pickle or, some olives. Something a little, salty to add.
Interesting. Pickles, not usually something I go to, but, I feel like I should. Because I do like pickles.
Dad tells this story all the time of when I was, a little kid, probably toddler-y, and we were at some party somewhere, and he said, he came over to find me, and I was over at the snack table, and he thought I was going to be grabbing desserts, brownies and chocolate or whatever. And I was over by, they didn't really call them cheese boards, but I was over by the cheese boards, and I was picking up olives and pickles.
Good for you.
And I guess he looks at me because he has such a sweet tooth, and he's like, is this my kid?
I know for me, if I'm doing a cheese board, I like to get a variety of cheeses, although I will admit that I tend to avoid mild cheeses just because I prefer sharp or tangy or just stronger flavored cheeses.
She's on record,
yeah,
I think on this podcast and for sure on our social media of saying how much she loves stinky cheese, everybody.
I do, so much. And then I love either honey or a fig jam to go with. I like something sweet to go with the cheese. So
I do love a good honey, especially here in Pennsylvania, we have a lot of you can find a lot of local honeys, which are my absolute favorite.
Yeah. So let's listen to Christine. Let's learn a little more about her background in dairying and learn what she likes to put on her cheese boards.
I'm ready to be hungry.
Christine, welcome to the Farmhouse.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So you are a sixth-generation dairy farmer. Tell us about your family's farm and what it was like growing up there.
So someone in my family has been farming here for over 150 years, which is pretty fun. So we're considered a sesquicentennial farm. I like to throw that word in wherever I can because it took a lot of practice to get that word right. But yeah, so we milk 45 registered Holstein cows. For those people that don't know, Holsteins are the black and white ones. And then last year I added a few sprinkles to our herd as well. So I added a Guernsey, a Jersey, and an Ayrshire. I've been lucky enough to have a few heifer calves out of them. So I now have 3 brown cows and 2 red cows in addition to all of our black and white cows. And then growing up on the farm, we've been able to stay pretty small. And so as my parents and I have 3 siblings as well growing up here. And kind of a fun fact, so I'm 6th generation, but for the last 3 generations, the farm has actually transitioned on the women's side of the family. So my mom grew up on this farm, and then her mom grew up on this farm. So, people were always like, it's not the Leonard farm. It used to be the Biskins farm, and before that, it was the Westbecker farm. So, the farm has actually changed names a few times too, which is, I think, pretty cool. So
I love to hear that. Okay, so what made you want to expand from just dairy farming into, I guess, would the term be cheesemongering, what you do?
Cheesemongering is the perfect word for that. You nailed that. So, I guess I'll kind of go back to the beginning. So I grew up on the farm, loving it, never expecting to be the farmer. Kind of had told myself we're too small for me to come back home to the farm, so I really didn't anticipate that. And then also, at that point in time, I didn't see a lot of women farmers. That there was women behind the scenes, but not necessarily as kind of the forerunners on their farms. And so when I went off to college, I actually didn't really think I was going to come home to the farm at all. I know this is a long way to get into how I was cheesemongering,
No,
but
that's
I
all right.
promise it all connects. And so really when I went off to college, I have a degree in food science and technology from the University of Wisconsin Stout in Menominee, Wisconsin. I knew what those foods looked like on the raw side when they left our farm. I knew what they looked like on the finished side when you picked up a block of cheese or a gallon of milk or whatever it is. I really wanted to know what happens in between there. What is that too between farm to fork? I knew that I loved being involved with what people were eating in some sort of a way, and I saw that as my way to do that. I always say I got bit by the farming bug about a year before I graduated, and I called my parents and I was like, I really want to come home and farm with you. And they were like, no way, go do something else. They basically said, this is too much work for not enough money. Make sure you really want this lifestyle before you come home and farm. And so then I spent the next year making cheese and milking cows at an artisan creamery in central Minnesota called Redhead Creamery. And that is really where I fell in love with the artisan cheese side of things. And that kind of is where my cheesemongering journey started. Yeah.
Tell us about the Grater Good, which is your business. How did you land on charcuterie boards, and where do you source your products?
My year up at that creamery, like I said, I really started to develop a love and a passion for that really, really small farmstead aspect scale of things, or more single source cheeses. That was really for me. Before that, I knew what cheese looked like from, this is Colby Jack, this is cheddar, this is Gouda, but I didn't really know anything more than that. And my experience at Redhead really kind of helped me learn a little bit more about how much personality cheese can have, and just really that terroir. They talk about that in wine all the time, that sense of place. Cheese can truly have the same thing. So when I came home, my parents did let me come home. So I've been full-time farming since January of 2018. But when I did come home, I knew right away that I was going to sort of need to have a niche on our farm in order to be able to farm at the size and scale that I wanted to. I thought I was going to bottle milk right off the bat, and then I realized how much capital and how much time on-farm processing takes, and that was also 2018. 2018 is the year that Wisconsin lost 700 dairy farms due to low milk prices. I always say I was blessed with the ignorance of not knowing what I was coming into. I was like, yeah, we don't make any money. That's just normal, right? Like, we just can survive. Hopefully we can survive. So knew that diversity was going to be super important. I had been doing some demoing work for Redhead Creamery, still working with a lot of cheesemongers and a lot of cheese sections and cheese shops throughout Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I got to meet all these cool people that their job was that they got to bring in all this cheese and sell it. And they would introduce me to all sorts of different local cheeses, international cheeses all across the board. And I was like, this is super cool. I started making little cheese boards for myself at home. I'd post them on, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Somebody was like, can I buy one? And I was like, sure, you can buy a cheese board from me. I think I made $2 on my first cheese board, but it kind of has grown from there. All of a sudden, it was people I didn't know that were asking me about getting a cheese board. And so I found out I needed to have a licensed commercial kitchen. So we put that up in 2020. Not a lot else going on in 2020, so that worked out good. And slowly my business has expanded from just the cheese and charcuterie boards to a lot of cheese tasting and education classes. So just like people can do a flight of wine, they can do a flight of cheese. I travel right to their homes. I work with breweries, wineries, distilleries, libraries, book clubs, you name it. And we just added a little on-farm cheese shop as well. So yeah, I guess I didn't talk about where that cheese is coming from too. I work with a lot of local producers. My favorite thing about the cheese community, it is such a willing and giving community. How does the phrase go? A rising tide lifts all boats. And that's so true in the cheese industry. The kind of artisan cheese we're seeing in the United States compared to what we saw 40 years ago is leaps and bounds ahead of where it used to be. And that comes back down to the community supports each other. So it's just been really fun to get to work with a lot of cool cheesemakers. So
I love to hear that. I mean, gosh, the idea of doing like a cheese flight in a library sounds like a little slice of heaven. I'm actually kind of, though, like, I guess I'm kind of surprised that the librarians are letting people, like, eat in the library, but I guess, they'll make exceptions.
Yeah, it was in like a little rec room or whatever. They like to do sort of fun stuff. So we made everybody wash their hands before they went back out to the general area.
There you
So
go. The books are safe.
yes.
So why is it important for you to get your cheeses or other supplies from businesses that you know and that you trust that are probably local?
I think the biggest thing is really what we've seen, especially in the last 4 to 5 years, is that support of the local community is really everything. I could definitely make my boards for a lot cheaper and I could be making a lot more money if I sourced from bigger creameries. But the beauty of the dairy industry overall is that across the board, no matter the price point, we're providing a healthy product that is packed full of nutrition, that it's amazing that we can offer it at a price range from $3 a pound all the way up to $50 a pound. How cool is that? And what I decided that I wanted to do with my business was really kind of shed a light on all of these makers and farmers that are doing stuff just a little bit differently. And if you were just to go to the grocery store and be like, that cheese is $30 a pound, why would I pay for that when the cheese sitting right next to it is $7 a pound? And I feel like my role as a cheesemonger is really to tell that story. This is how they did it. This is why they don't have thousands of millions of pounds of milk that they can spread this cost over. So it needs to be a little bit higher price point to support this farmer, to support this maker. And that's really important to me, is just to kind of, be a vessel to tell those stories.
So, one of our columnists recently wrote about how it's been relatively recently that charcuterie boards have sort of exploded in popularity. You're listening, the story is called More Than Meat and Cheese, The History of Charcuterie Boards. It's by Carol Hardberger, and I recommend reading it. So why do you think people have turned to charcuterie boards rather than just, putting out some cheese and crackers and calling it a day?
I think we're all looking for an outlet, a way to express ourselves artistically, and when we can do something that not only lets us do something to make something beautiful with our hands, but also lets us share that with other people and really makes it a fun focal point of the party. As a dairy farmer, I'm thrilled at the kind of popularity that cheese and charcuterie boards have really had, because it's inviting people to gather, to congregate together, to tell stories, to put pairings together over a shared plate of dairy. And I mean, I couldn't be more thrilled about that. So I think it's that combination of artistry and community. I think that's really been huge for that.
I love to hear that. I've made a few charcuterie boards myself, and yes, there is some creativity to it, and it is a lot of fun to put together and to make the little
Yes,
the meat
definitely.
flowers and stuff. I recently learned how to do that.
I think it's funny too, we all think that charcuterie boards are so, just of now, but my parents got married. It's their 40th wedding anniversary this year, and my grandma pulled out a receipt from their wedding reception, and they had a cheese, meat, and cracker board, basically a charcuterie board 40 years ago already. And so I think, we've been doing it for a long time, but really getting for it to be a highlight, I think has been a really fun transition over the last few years.
Do you have a favorite cheese right now? And I say right now because I kind of believe that cheeses are a little like songs in that you may have had a favorite cheese a year or so ago, but it might be different than your favorite cheese now versus your favorite cheese maybe in another year or 5 years.
Oh, I'm really glad you phrased it that way, because that gives me a little bit more room. One of my current obsessions, it's called North Fork. It's a whiskey washed Munster by Redhead Creamery. So a little disclaimer, when I started at the creamery, I was like, okay, I like cheddar and I like Colby, right? I don't know anything else that I like. And I would just start with these really mild cheeses when I was up there. And by the end, North Fork, so it's a French style Munster, so it's a washed rind. It's a little more stinky. It's got this bright orange rind with these beautiful blue and dark colored culture spots on it, basically, and it looks a little scary, but when you dig into it, it's just this creamy, beautiful, buttery, salty, umami spreadable cheese, like on a little rosemary cracker, or like those ones with the little cranberry and hazelnut in them. Oh, it's so good.
It sounds delicious.
So yeah, that's my current favorite.
That sounds amazing. I had to ask because we've talked to a cheese maker, Becky Collins Brooks, and I asked her the same thing, and she put us onto it's called Comté, And since then, I've tried Comte, and it was like, oh, it's so good. I loved it. What are some charcuterie board ingredients, whether they be meat, cheeses, toppings, that you think more people should try?
Can I do a little clarification here too? So when we use the word cheese versus when we use the word charcuterie. So I say what I make are cheese boards because the cheese is the focus of them and I add charcuterie to them. So when we're making a charcuterie board, that would be a board made with cured meats that those are going to be kind of the focal point of it. So you can definitely make a charcuterie board, you can definitely make a cheese board. What I make is more cheese boards. I know that's like a silly little thing that I know drives some people in the industry crazy, and so I just like to shed a little light on that's what those words mean, and that's when we're using them to reflect like that.
That's good to know. I had no idea.
For me, my favorite things to add to a cheese board, I love to add like a jam. I have a big sweet tooth, and so like a nice crystally honey on there. My sister-in-law makes all the jams that I use for my business, and like right now I have a cherry vanilla that is just bomb diggity. The creamery is called Four Fat Fowl, so it'd be in Steventown, New York, and they make a cheese called Saint Stephen that we did with the cherry vanilla jam with that for Valentine's Day. Incredible. It was so good on there. I like something a little crunchy too. So whether that be like a pickle or a cornichon or some olives or something like that is fun on there too. A little bit of nuts. I used lemon curd for a cheese pairing the other day as well, which was so fun. It was a blue cheese, a quintuple cream blue cheese with juniper berries in it, and lemon curd on top of that made it just this like flavor bomb. Made blue cheese a dessert for sure. So.
That all sounds so good. I'm gonna leave this interview so hungry. I might have to stop at the store on the way home and get something. So I know you said you offer kind of classes. You have these tasting sessions. When people attend one of these classes or tasting sessions, what are they learning about besides getting to try new cheeses or new cheeses to them? Are they learning anything about ag as well?
For sure. One of my favorite questions to ask. So I should say our farm is located about 45 minutes west of Minneapolis, St. Paul. So we're just west of the Twin Cities. And when they come to my classes or when I go to them, especially the more into the West Metro that I get, I like to ask before I even start the class, so how many of you guys know a farmer? And, usually it's crickets. Not a lot of people have that connection to agriculture anymore. And so I always like to say, now you know at least one farmer. You know me, I'm Christine, hi. And I always encourage them too, please let me be your resource. So if you see something online that you're like, what's happening here? I don't know what this is. Why are they doing that? Send it to me, and I'd love to be able to talk to you about it, to be your point of contact on that. And so with the classes, I do tell a little bit of my family's farm story, and then we also talk about the ingredients that go into making cheese. So milk, cultures, rennet, and salt. And we get to kind of do a little deep dive into that, and it's so fun, the kinds of questions that people come up with. And I love to be able to be the resource for them to kind of have, again, that point of contact. I mean, that's what we need, is a connection back to agriculture, and I'm so happy to use cheese as the vessel to get to do that.
Have you gotten a lot of people that have followed up and maybe, even if it's a question that's unrelated to dairy or unrelated to cheese, that you've been able to help them out?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, so especially at like a wine pairing class, by the time we get to like the fifth pairing, the questions get a lot bolder. And I will have people be like, why do they do this? Or why do they do that? And it's just so nice to be able to just be like, it's okay. You don't have to worry when you see that, We always laugh. A good friend of mine, Paige Farms, or that used to be her Instagram. She just changed it, but she's a herdswoman up at a creamery where they have milking robots, and she's always laughs because she's like, people see the robots and you're like, why should farmers get to use technology? And it's like, no, how amazing that we can incorporate technology into all areas of agriculture. I mean, these are really labor-intensive jobs, and so if we're able to incorporate technology in all these ways, how cool is that? So I think just that general, to be that point of contact, I guess. So
I'm so glad that you and your friend are able to provide people with that information. I don't work on a farm, but I work kind of like in agriculture now, working at Lancaster Farming. And so to hear the fact that someone had a question, why would farms use technology, kind of blows my mind, because I know that farming uses a lot of technology these days. It's not the 1800s anymore.
You would be surprised, Candace, at how often I get asked, do you still milk the cows by hand? And I'm like, wow. Our cows are giving about 10 gallons of milk a day. Times 45, I think I would have carpal tunnel in about 2 weeks if we milked everybody by hand. But I think that's a really important way to educate on the safety of dairy, though, too. I always say that when the milk leaves our cow's udder, it doesn't touch air until you open that gallon of milk at your table. The average gallon of milk travels less than 200 miles from farm to table. How cool is that to be able to talk about such a local product?
It's very cool. So obviously, you're very busy with the Grater Good and dairying. How do you manage to juggle it all? Because I imagine your schedule, even in the evenings, then or the weekends, that you still have these classes or these sessions. You must be very busy.
I have always thrived on a busier schedule. One of those people that when I can have bookmarks to my day, I get a lot more done. When I have a free afternoon, nothing gets done. I don't know why that is. So we actually adjusted our cow's schedule. So we milk at 8 o'clock and 8 o'clock rather than, most people are like, are you up at 4? And I'm like, well, I might be up at 5 to make cheese boards. I do all my prep for the day before I go out to the barn in the mornings. And then when I do these classes, they're more at like 5 or 6 at night. Nobody wants to do a cheese class at 3 o'clock. Can you believe it? But so I'll do all those and then we'll come home and I'll milk then. And I think the biggest thing for me is that with my side business, what I found with the Grater Good is that it's really been an awesome outlet. I'm an extrovert. I mean, that's through and through, and dairy farming can be a pretty isolating career, especially at the size that we are at. And so, I can only talk to my dad and my dog so much. And my mom, she has an off-the-farm job in addition to helping on the farm. Through my business, it really allows me this opportunity to connect with people and to make friends with the customers. I have a few customers that have been to like 10 tasting classes and have plans to come to more, just because like they're my friends and we basically get to like eat cheese and they get to drink wine while we're talking about fun stuff. So I really find a lot of fulfillment through my work, both the dairying side and the cheese mongering side. So that's the thing about dairy farming, right? It's a lifestyle, and my Grater Good work just fits right into that as well.
Nice. Well, I'm glad that it's working out. So what does it mean to be a woman in ag? What does that mean to you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think really what it means is that I have a unique perspective, a unique outlook on things, and that sometimes I can be a little bit more of an approachable outlet for somebody like somebody that should be really easy to talk to, right? This is just such a great question. I attended this event last week where we really dove into this, and there can be negatives to being a woman in agriculture, but I think there can be negatives to being a young person in agriculture. There can be negatives to being anybody that looks a little bit different in agriculture. Boy, I guess I just see it as an opportunity to be able to do something different, to make the way that I farm, the way that my family farms, the way that I represent my business and I represent dairy, just to offer just a little bit different perspective on that. And I think I've been so lucky to have a community of farms in our area that are so supportive of me as a woman in agriculture, that if I have trouble with a salesman or if I have trouble with, getting something hauled here, I can be like, will you just call this guy for me? Because he's not going to listen to me, I'm lucky enough to have a community around me that really supports me and sees value in what I do. And I guess I appreciate that.
That's wonderful to hear. There's no right answer and there's no wrong answer to that question. It really is different for everyone. And we ask everyone we talk to that question, and I don't think we've ever heard the same answer twice.
I just think about the generations of women that came before me and how much work they had done on their families' farms, and they got no recognition. Most of them got no recognition at all. I have a senior in high school who's helping me with chores a few days a week right now. She's a young woman. She came from in town. She didn't grow up in agriculture, and she's going to study agriculture in college, and she keeps getting all this pushback. Like, there's no jobs in agriculture. There's no jobs for women in agriculture. And I just took her to an event on Monday that I was like, here, let me introduce you to these 5 young women in agriculture, all about my age. This is what they're doing. This is how they're making their mark. And hopefully she can walk through the doors that all of us are just trying to open for her too. So I think that's the most important part.
And I'm really happy to hear that you're, serving as a mentor for her and hopefully other girls in the future. So I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today and tell us all about the Grater Good and your history and dairying.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I mean, it's a honor to be on this podcast. I really appreciate any opportunity to get to share my family story. And I always encourage people to, if they have questions about how they can do something a little bit different, to think a little bit outside the box. I'd love to be a sounding board for them too, because I'll be your biggest cheerleader, I promise.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed listening to your conversation with Christine. First of all, as I am a self-proclaimed Munster lover, as I said in the beginning of the episode, I am very intrigued to try the whiskey-washed Munster cheese she talked about. That sounds really fascinating.
We're going to have to get after that.
Yeah. We'll have to bring some into the office for sure. But honestly, first of all, a flight of cheese. I don't think I knew that a flight of cheese existed, which I guess it makes sense. I've actually had like ice cream flights, so I guess you can do a cheese flight.
You can apply flight to I think anything.
Yeah, that sounds like the perfect way for me to get more into cheese is to do like some sort of cheese flight tasting type of thing.
Yeah, where you're not committing to an entire wedge.
Yeah, figure out what I like. But honestly, again, I am so basic in my cheese consumption at this very moment in my life that I don't know if I've ever thought about cheese having personality. And I'm fascinated by that. I feel like you are much more advanced in your cheese eating habits.
In my cheesery.
So do you agree that do you see cheeses having their own personality?
I don't know. Like I feel like if I knew the background of where certain cheeses were coming from, then I think I would feel that more. I was thinking about how she used the term terroir, I think is how you say it, meaning like a sense of place within your food. And I was trying to think of like foods that I've had recently where I felt like there was a sense of place. And I thought about how recently our videographer did a video at a local pretzel making place called Martin's Pretzels. And you can see the video on lancasterfarming.com. And he brought back some of these pretzels for us, and they are so good. And I swear I can like feel like the people who made these pretzels, and I mean, they kind of sing while they make the pretzels, which is amazing. And so I feel like there's a real sense of place within those pretzels. They have, to me, that kind of like, there's something here. There's something that like I can't really put my finger on, but there's something special about them. And I think that's probably because I'm informed about where they come from. I think that helps create that sense.
Yeah. And I feel like Christine is doing such a good job of creating informed consumers with all the education she's doing. And first of all, I love how she tells people like, let me be your resource. Like the dairy industry, it's very broad, and she's found like this very like unique little niche that she's, especially since she comes from such a generational dairy farm. I feel like it might be hard sometimes as you get, into those later generations to find like your place in the farm. I will say, I was very impressed to hear that their dairy farm, for the most part, transitioned down generation to generation through the women of the family. I don't think I know personally of any farm that has multiple generations of transition down through the women. That's incredible to me.
Yeah, that is awesome. I feel like that was a real cool like farmhouse kind of moment where it's like, yes, this is within the spirit of what we're trying to do here.
Exactly.
Love to hear it.
Yeah. All right. So I guess everyone is now hungry for cheese.
I know I am. I just had lunch and I'm already hungry for cheese.
We'll leave you with that so you can go get a snack. We'll wrap it up here.
Thank you all for listening. If you like this episode, please consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And if you really like this episode, please consider leaving us a review.
If you have any questions or thoughts about this episode or the podcast in general, you can email us at farmhouse@lancasterfarming.com.
You can also find us on social media at Lancaster Farming on most platforms.
Thank you again for listening and visiting us at the farmhouse. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Candace.
We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
And one more thing before we go. If you guys recall, last year on the farmhouse, we talked a little bit about the reality dating show Farmer Wants a Wife. And we are very excited to announce that we are launching a brand new podcast called Farmer Wants a Wife After Party, where basically we will talk all things Farmer Wants a Wife all the time. So get ready for that. It'll be a lot of fun. So check out this trailer and hopefully you'll join us at the after party. This episode of The Farmhouse is copyright 2025 by Lancaster Farming Newspapers, part of the Steinman Communication family.
It was written by Stephanie Spiker and Candace Wierzbowski. It was produced by Eric Herlock and Sophia Kurzius. The music is by Tin Bird Shadow.